With that,
No.
I am going to, since we have a quorum, move forward to call the Budget and Finance Committee meeting to order. A voting conflict. Going to handle some of this, or you want me to? Carlos is going to handle it. Carlos.
Do any board members have a voting conflict with any items on the agenda?
Having no voting conflicts, anyone in the audience would like to make a public comment prior to the start of the meeting? Seeing none, request that from the audience I will move to action items. Approval of the minutes. November 19th. We have a motion. Do we have a second? Second. Any opposed? The minutes for the meeting of the November 19th have been adopted. Marie, can you take us through the financials, please?
Yes, sir. We do have a handout. We did do a sort of a dashboard, revenue at a glance. But on the revenue side, year to date, this is for the 6 months in our fiscal year 15, we posted $74.5 million. That is below our forecast, about almost $3 million. Majority of that is made up of the toll and fee revenue. So I want to direct your attention to the visual, the revenue at a glance. The good news is, over 80% of our revenue comes from SunPass. And then we have $11 million coming from toll by plate. And then we had $1.8 beginning of the fiscal year on the cash traditional plazas. Below the pie chart, we have the toll and fee revenue bar chart. And what we built in our forecast for July and August is that we knew we were going through a transition last fiscal year, and we did realize that we wouldn't get through the backlog of the transition until probably the fourth or fifth month of the upcoming fiscal year. So we built that in July and August. So we pretty much met our forecast. And in September, where you can see a big jump up on the revenue, and that is because of how revenue is recognized. Once a bill on the toll by plate is generated, we recognize the revenue. So we got through the backlog in September, which is why you see that significant increase there. And then in October, November, December, we essentially began to take an allowance for doubtful accounts for our receivables, which we had not done for the first quarter of the fiscal year. Just to explain a little bit about the accounts receivable on a gross level, we have on the books about $13.8 million of gross receivable. About 59% of that is sitting in our collection bucket. And that's like, I think, Steve, that's over 120 days time frame, somewhere around there. Okay. So we have about 59% of our receivables that are sitting in collections. And what operations has done in the last couple of months is we initiated the registration hold, and we've got a very good response on that. And what that means is people are coming and reaching out to us to make payment. We've had some issues on the operational side on the customer service, which I think is in the process of being corrected. But we do see a ramp up in the collection side of it. So we do have still a receivable of 13.8, but I think we're making an improvement on the collection side of that. Below, on the bottom part of that page, is toll transactions. And toll transactions from July was about 20.7 million, up to December about 33.9. So since we went live on 8/36, you can see that there is a jump up in the number of transactions. And pretty much, I think it's pretty consistent to what we expected from a forecast perspective. And we haven't gone through a complete explanation of revenue, Mr. Treasurer, so I thought it'd be helpful just to give you a little view for the 6-month point. On the expenditure side, really nothing to speak of that really jumps out. I will say that this is the first time in the last couple of years that we're showing net revenue that's below our forecast, about a little bit under $500,000. So we'll continue to monitor that. That's something that really concerns us at this point in time, but I did want to bring that to the committee's attention.
Thank you, Marie. Any questions from the floor concerning the financial reports? If there are none, I will entertain a motion to accept them as presented. We have a motion and a second. Any opposed? Our treasurer's report has been accepted as presented. We now move to MDX procurement contract RFQ 1406, municipal financial advisory services. Helen, you're going to take us through that?
Yes, thank you, sir. The requested action is to the endorsement of the negotiated contract with First Southwest Company. At the December 9th, 2014, the MDX board approved the selection of First Southwest Company to provide municipal financial advisory services and direct the staff to negotiate the compensation rates under such contract. Staff negotiated a fair comparable contract rates with minimal to no increase from the rates under the previous contract, which was negotiated in 2009. Attached to your package is the method of compensation for your consideration. The contract term is for 3 years with a renew option of 2 additional years, and the services will be authorized through the issuance of task authorizations as needed.
Open the floor for comments on this particular item.
Do we know of anybody at First Southwest to be of a culpable state of mind or negligent? Because now we're very intelligent about these things. I'm only kidding. That was a joke.
Good one.
You're not even on this committee. I love it.
Having no comments from the floor or questions concerning this procurement contract, I will entertain a motion on the proposed contract. We have second. Any opposed? Having no opposition, we have accepted the recommended actions on this procurement contract. We now will address procurement contract number RFP 1404, MDX Project Service Title Investment Advisory Services.
That would be me again, sir. There's 2 requested actions on this item. One is the approval to reject all proposals and cancel the MDX procurement contract number 1404. And the second requested action is the approval to re-advertise an RFP for the investment advisory services. On July of last year, we received 4 proposals in response to the RFP from Charlotte Asset Management, Davidson Fixed Income Management, First Southwest Asset Management, and Public Trust Advisors. Compliance was performed on the proposals, and all proposals were missing information to determine responsiveness. They were offered the opportunity to provide the required information to determine responsiveness. Unfortunately, after receiving that information, they were still non-responsive, all 4 of them, for different reasons, ranging from not having the years of experience from either the firm or the personnel, or not having the required license of some of the personnel. So for that reason, staff is recommending that we cancel that procurement since we have non-responsive proposer, and that the services be re-advertised in the same manner that they had been in originally.
Like the action to be handled as one, Carlos? You would like the cancellation of the... Then let's move on the cancellation.
Second.
All opposed? So having no opposition, we will move on the cancellation of the contract as presented. We will now address the issue of re-advertising, the request for proposal. We have a motion. We have a second. Any opposed?
I have a
question.
Okay.
We did review the requirements of the RFP and determined that no changes were needed. I think that some of the reasons why the proposals were non-responsive it goes back to the assumption of, oh, this is what they asked for, but really they don't need that for the services, so we're going to provide this. So I think we're going to have this time around, we're going to have a mandatory pre-proposal conference and make sure that they understand that it is what we ask for, not what they assume we need based on the services.
Question.
Yes.
Helen, I thought I heard you mention one of the reasons, or maybe one of the proposers, or all the proposers, had to do with their licensing not being there at all or up to date.
Right. So, for example, we asked that the account manager be licensed with as an investment advisor with the CSA, and so some of them decided, well, you don't really need the account manager to be licensed because we're just going to be your daily, account manager, not necessarily doing investments for you. But the requirement was for the account manager to have that license.
Going to be a requirement for the next?
Yeah.
It is.
Okay.
It is. Because they're going to be overseeing who's going to be doing the investment. They're going to be the ones, our daily contact. So we want that person to have that knowledge and
First, the original respondents who want to play in the second round to assign a licensed account manager.
Right, and when I do contact them to let them know about the actions of this committee, I would have that discussion with them about.
Here's what I really don't like, because this goes back to a discussion we've had a couple of meetings ago. Our proposal, we put out information exactly based on what we need in order for you to present a proposal to us. I don't want folks thinking that, oh, well, they don't really need this, and they don't really need that, and they don't really need that. I take serious issue to that, and I think I voiced that in the past, and I think we all should. So, Alfredo, I think, you're right. I mean, who are we going to get now to submit proposals if this is the attitude of those who sent in?
I suspect that we're going to get the ones that are really serious about getting the business, and you will still probably have one that may fall out or two. But at the end of the day, the penalty is that if 3 of these folks would have answered and responded correctly, that third non-compliant one would have been dropped out.
Right.
So the real penalty is exclusion, right? And in this particular case, they all 4 made a mistake or several mistakes. Let's see who comes to the table with the correct responses this time around.
But it's to the detriment of MDX. I mean, this is a timing issue as well.
Absolutely.
So we've gone through all this work, and now we're back to square zero. And
but Mr. Chairman, may I?
Yes, please.
No, it doesn't look good at all. We have all 4 non-respondents.
Please, Ms.
So,
Weinberg,
yeah.
the reason is that it's $85,000 a year. And for these guys, that's a drop in the bucket. So they could care less.
Then they shouldn't be responding, Maurice, with all due respect. I'm sorry.
I know, but I think that you have Southwest, which is one of the responders. I think that they'll recognize, because I have enough confidence in our procurement agent and in our director to tell these people, listen, this time you're embarrassed. If this thing goes wrong again, I'm going to be embarrassed. Don't embarrass me. And I think it'll be, and if it isn't, then I think you are going to be embarrassed.
No, I'm fine. I'm not looking for punishment or anything. I mean, this will not fly in the private sector. You know that. So my concern is, and I think the message needs to continue to be, that when MDX puts out a contract, anybody interested in submitting a proposal needs to check all the boxes, period. You don't get to decide what we really need or what we don't need. That's all I want us to make clear on.
Typically, you said something that's very critical. You mentioned the private sector. Typically in the private sector, continued and repeated non-responsiveness, because it wastes your time as well as theirs, is penalized by not inclusion in future contract. So we need to, if this is happening on a repeated basis with some of the submittals from a particular party, we need to really consider whether there is an exclusionary position on the part of MDX for someone who continually creates a problem for us with respect to misuse of our time and wasted effort and so on and so forth. I'm not sure that you can do that.
We'll explore it
in the private sector. We can,
right.
So you need to be a little careful. But certainly the penalty for someone who has repeated offenses on a regular basis is last time you're included on the list of participants. Okay.
We can look at that in our policy committee, perhaps.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, this is very timely because in February, sometime in February, I know we're discussing with the Chair of Policy and Planning a procurement workshop where we're going to look at the entire procurement policy. We're going to look at our small and local business policies. We're going to bring in experts from the National Institute of Government Purchasing to discuss best practices, and I think that's the right time for this board to make whatever policy decisions they need to make, including whatever the ramifications might be as far as, repeat offenders.
That would be a good idea.
That's where you discuss tolerance, what's acceptable, what isn't. I think what Helen has done, and when she discussed this particular case with me, we can't make exceptions. It's the rule's the rule, and if you're late by a few minutes, by a half, you can't be arbitrary on what you're going to accept or what you're not going to accept, which is why we said let's cancel and let's start again.
I would prefer to see that happen than to be arbitrary in any way, shape, or form. Any further discussion? We have a motion and a second on the floor for this particular item.
Yes.
Any opposed? Forward with a reprocurement or for this proposal.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Marie, you want to take us through some of the thoughts on the bond series refunding options?
As a discussion item, we have the market has presented a refunding opportunity. We have First Southwest Randy Topol that has a one-page presentation. I believe the handout is in everybody's folder.
I will say that the way the market is behaving, we're going to continue to have to see these because the market is doing some very interesting things.
Randy Topol, First Southwest.
Randy, how are you?
Doing well.
Happy New Year.
It's been a good year. Short, but good so far. One of the things that you directed us back in November and in December also is just to keep an eye on the market and the conditions and how it relates to your outstanding debt. One of the things that has happened is the flattening of the yield curve. The back end of the yield curve is compressing more than the middle and the front due to economic conditions. Something that wasn't economical to refund as short as last September when we looked at these transactions are now coming into the money. And we've had a lot of compression in the long part of the yield. So what we did is we looked at some of the bonds that we eliminated because they didn't generate the required savings at the time of the last refunding. And we have $119 million of bonds and change that we've always had on the scope, but it's come back on bright. We've looked at this in two ways, just a straight refunding, uniform savings top to bottom. It generates close to 9-10% in the current market. We don't anticipate any major market moves upward due to the European crisis. If anything, we might see continual drifting, pressing down of the interest rate. So, again, this is a discussion item, not an action item, because there's probably a little bit of time involved. The other thing with an advance refunding that we had on the last deal and we have on this deal is negative arbitrage. Negative arbitrage is the amount of money that you cannot invest your securities to pay off the old debt. Because when you call in your bonds, they're called in to their first call date. That first call date is a year out in the future. Everyone knows that the interest rates on those are next to nothing. You might get, 30 basis points, 50 basis points of earnings if you're lucky. So the negative arbitrage is one of the things we really look closely. And we had negative arbitrage on our last transaction. This one is actually more efficient than the last one, just because the time between the time we issued the bonds and the call date is getting shorter. The shorter it gets, the less the negative arbitrage. So waiting a month or two down the line saves you additional money if the interest rates do not go up. So that's a little bit of a balancing impact. Right now, you have 76%, mid-70% efficiency. That means if we had a perfect escrow, you would have savings in the tune of $16 to $17 million. As it relates, because you have negative arbitrage, if you look down on the line on the right-hand side, negative arbitrage is almost $4 million. That is the amount of money that we cannot invest all the way up to the bond yield. And the bond yield on this case is about 2.9%. That's how low your investment yield would be on the bonds. The other thing that we also did with this structure is we also looked at a way to plan for the future. With our last bond issue, when we shortened it up, we're looking at prepaying these bonds a little bit faster than before, chopping off almost 5 years from the final maturity and paying them off on average 4 years earlier than they originally were. This helps with the savings analysis. And we aren't doing it to sacrifice new money capacity. If you look at the chart there, the before and after refunding, what I'm trying to do is fill in a little bit of the huge drop-off and create a downward slope. That downward slope is essentially an equal principal type of structure. That is the highest quality of debt structure that you could have out there in the market. It's gone away to level debt service as being a fallback, only because only the AAA entities, the highest level ones, can afford an equal principal because your debt service descends. Gives you a lot of flexibility going forward with future bond issues, because once you get on that downward slope, every year you create additional capacity. So this is something we wanted to show you. Next month, we'll come in with recommendations.
I agree with you, Randy, that there may be an opportunity of time here. We agree with the market prognosis that you've put out there. I would like to see a recommendation by next month.
The recommendation will be here next month.
Yeah, this is definitely an opportunity we can't miss. At least to take a hard look at it. I know we're keeping you guys very busy, but
technically, I'm in a blackout period. I'm not legally your financial advisor, so I cannot give you a recommendation in this time.
He's not
as
under
we just
contract.
went through.
Understood. Yeah, right. Okay. Thank you, Randy. This is definitely a time that we need to look at this once again. So we're going to keep Marie busy. Marie keeps wishing for the market to turn a little bit. Okay. Any other additional comments from the floor? We do have some meetings coming up. So a board coming up on the 27th at 4 p.m.
And I also wanted to convey to this committee, I spoke with the Chair of Policy and Planning, as I mentioned before, and I will be sending out a few dates that I'm coordinating with her of what's best for you, because one workshop, the Chair of Policy and Planning. One workshop will be for procurement alone, and then there will be another 2-hour session to look at all the other policies as one. So we'll go through everything else. Whatever we need to look at, whenever we need to update, we'll take care of it that day. And then one other day will just be for procurement. So be on the lookout for an email from us with a couple of dates, and the majority will win, I guess is the only way we can do it. Okay? And we'll try to make it as convenient for the board members.
Any other item that would like to be brought up before the floor? If none are there, we will move to adjourn. Have motion to adjourn, please.
Motion.
So moved. Meeting has adjourned. I think on time.